Welcome. You know that feeling, right? The one that creeps in as an exam date looms, whether it's a big university final or even a test in secondary school. That mix of, I've got this, maybe, and the overwhelming coin of just where to even begin.
That's precisely what we're digging into today. Why does getting ready for academic exams so often feel like climbing a mountain? And more importantly, what are some practical ways to make that climb a bit less steep?
Exactly. We've got a really insightful piece of research that pulls back the curtain on this. It's a study from 1997 in the Educational Psychology Review called Some of the Reasons Why Preparing for Exams is So Hard. What Can Be Done to Make It Easier? These folks are experts in how we learn, how we're taught, and how our brains process information, so they've really gone deep into the science of study.
Yeah, our goal in this deep dive is to extract their core findings and translate them into something useful for you. We want to pinpoint the biggest roadblocks to effective exam preparation that they've identified. But, more than that, we want to equip you with concrete strategies you can actually use, whether you're a student navigating this yourself or you're supporting someone who is.
Absolutely. The article really breaks down the challenges into three main areas. First, it looks at the materials we're often given to learn from things like textbooks.
Mhm.
Then it examines the impact of teaching methods. And finally, it dives into how we as students process information ourselves. It's a really comprehensive overview, and we're going to explore each of these, and crucially, what teachers and students can actually do to make things better. Okay, so let's start with something we all have a complicated relationship with: textbooks.
And the article doesn't mince words about them. They actually refer to a conclusion from the Committee on High School Biology Education that said, and I quote, just about everything that could be wrong with contemporary biology textbooks is wrong with them. That's a pretty damning assessment.
It really is. And they get specific about why. Think about those massive textbooks. They try to cover absolutely everything, don't they? That means you're constantly bombarded with new terms.
So many new
They
terms.
even point out that sometimes the facts aren't entirely accurate, or they might even contradict what you're learning in class. That's hardly a solid starting point.
No, it's confusing. And what's interesting is the sheer number of ways these books can miss the mark. The logic can be, well, all over the place. Ideas in different chapters don't connect smoothly.
Right.
And even the pictures, which you'd think would clarify things, often seem more for decoration than actual explanation.
Yeah.
They cite research from like way back then on this.
Mm.
It makes you wonder, have things really changed that much since the 80s and 90s?
Exactly. You're looking at a glossy image of a cell, but it doesn't actually help you understand how the different parts work together. And then there's this fundamental issue they raise. These books often fail to connect the information to what you already know.
Yeah.
It's like the textbook lives in its own little world, and you're just supposed to magically absorb all this new stuff without any way to anchor it to your existing understanding. It's like trying to build a mental map with no...
Exactly. No landmarks. And that's a huge issue the article raises.
Which also brings up the reading level. Even if a textbook was perfectly written, if the language is way beyond what students can easily understand, it creates another huge hurdle.
hmm And as they correctly point out, reading abilities are going to vary widely in any classroom. So for many students, just getting through the assigned pages can be a major effort even before they start trying to actually learn the material. It's like trying to decipher a code while also learning the message.
Absolutely. So, we've got these potentially problematic textbooks.
Okay, now let's turn our attention to another big piece of the puzzle: teaching. It seems obvious that how you're taught would have a huge impact on how easy or difficult it is to prepare for exams.
Definitely. And one area where the quality of teaching really makes a difference, for better or worse, is in note taking. The article refers to a 1994 study where they talked to students about their experiences taking notes in class. The students reported a lot of difficulties that they attributed to what they called inconsiderate teachers.
Inconsiderate is a diplomatic way to put it, isn't it? These students describe teachers who presented information way too quickly to actually process and write down,
Yes, too fast.
who were vague in their explanations or
Mhm.
just totally disorganized in their lectures. Things like not clearly separating important points, jumping all over the place, or going off on tangents. It all adds up to a really frustrating note-taking experience.
Right.
Imagine trying to catch water in a sieve. And what's striking is the direct link these Maryland students made. They found that the notes they took in classes with these inconsiderate lecturers were much less helpful when they were studying for tests compared to notes from teachers who were, more organized and clear.
Yeah.
That really highlights how crucial effective communication is in the classroom.
That's such a key takeaway for you. Your notes are often your main study tool, so if the teaching style makes it hard to even create good notes in the first place, you're already starting behind.
Right.
And the article also mentions that students felt their note-taking skills improved over time, both within a single course and throughout their academic careers. This suggests that there's a learning process involved, and students at the beginning of a course or their studies might struggle more simply because they haven't yet figured out how to adapt to a particular teacher's style or the demands of the material.
Which leads us to another vital aspect of teaching, clearly outlining what's expected on the tests. The article cites some work on this from the 80s and 90s. If you don't know what kind of questions to expect on an exam, will be multiple choice. Essays. Problem solving. How difficult will it be? It's incredibly hard to study effectively.
It really is.
It's like preparing for a race without knowing the distance or the terrain. The Van Meter study also found that students often didn't realize what information from lectures was important until they'd already taken a test or two. It's like trying to hit a target you can't even see.
Exactly. So we've looked at the challenges posed by the learning materials and the instruction. Now, let's turn the spotlight onto ourselves as students and explore the various ways our own information processing can sometimes make exam preparation harder than it needs to be.
Okay, this is where things get really interesting and where you, as a student, have the most direct control. The article contrasts how effective learners handle information. Things like reading strategically, being aware of their own understanding, using what they already know, and staying motivated with what often happens for many students.
Let's start with reading strategies.
This part really jumped out at me. They describe how expert readers, like, say, college professors in one study, are incredibly active and adaptable when they read. They're constantly thinking ahead, checking if what they're reading makes sense based on what they expected, looking for specific information, even skipping around and changing how they read depending on the material. And crucially, they're summarizing and putting things in their own words as they go. It sounds exhausting, but also incredibly effective. Precisely. Another analysis of many different reading studies really confirms that this active approach is how experts read. But the key point for you is the huge difference compared to how many students read. The article emphasizes that students often don't engage with the text in the same active, meaning-making way. They tend to be much more passive readers.
And a study from '88 gives a really clear picture of this. University students preparing for multiple choice tests mostly just read the textbook from start to finish.
Straight through.
And when they reread, it was often just another passive run-through. That's so different from the active reading we just described. As the article points out, this more surface-level approach is pretty common among college students. It's like they're trying to absorb information by osmosis rather than actively wrestling with it.
Which leads directly to the importance of background knowledge. The article stresses that the more you already know about a topic, the easier it is to understand new information about it. This isn't just common sense. There's solid research behind it.
Right.
A lack of prior knowledge affects so many things. From even getting a general idea of what the text is about, to knowing what's important to pay attention to making predictions, connecting new information to what you already know, understanding the details, and even deciding if what you're reading makes sense. It's like trying to understand a complex recipe when you don't even know basic cooking terms.
It's like trying to build a complex structure with no foundation. And it's not just about reading. The article points out that even taking notes is easier when you have more background knowledge. Van Meter and his team found that students who knew more about the topic beforehand could take more selective notes, focusing on the new information in the lecture because they already had a good grasp of the basics.
Yeah, exactly. And here's a really important point for you. Even if you manage to find the specific information you're looking for in a text, as one study showed, you might not even realize it's important or relevant if you don't have enough background knowledge to understand its significance.
Oh, well.
It's like finding a single piece of a jigsaw puzzle, but having no idea where it fits because you haven't seen the bigger picture.
Okay, so having background knowledge is crucial. But the article also highlights that simply having it isn't enough. You need to actively use it. They talk about studies where students who are prompted to answer why questions about factual material learned the information better.
Yes, and what's interesting here is a finding from '91. These why questions really push students to connect the new information in the text to what they already know, much more than just passively reading.
Okay.
However, a '92 study adds a crucial detail. Asking why is only helpful if you actually have relevant prior knowledge to connect to. If that foundation isn't there, Just asking why isn't going to magically create understanding. It's like asking why a car engine works if you don't even know what an engine does.
That makes perfect sense. It's like asking why a complex math equation works if you don't understand the basic arithmetic it's built on. Now let's talk about this idea of transfer appropriate processing. It sounds a bit academic, but the basic idea seems really important for exam preparation.
It does sound technical, but the core principle outlined way back in '77 is actually quite straightforward.
Hmm?
The most effective way to prepare for a test is to make sure your study methods match what the test will actually ask you to do.
Okay.
However, the article points out that students often don't adjust their study strategies to fit the exam format.
Right. So if you're expecting a test that's all about remembering facts and definitions, just rereading your notes might seem like a good strategy. But if the test requires you to actually apply those concepts to new situations and solve problems, then simple memorization isn't going to cut it. You need to practice using the information.
Exactly. A 91 study is a great example. They found that students who explained the concepts to themselves as they were learning a computer programming language were much better at applying those skills to solve new problems later on, compared to students who just tried to memorize the programming rules.
Ah, interesting.
And other research also shows how valuable it is to ask yourself why questions and try to make inferences while you're learning.
It sounds like actively engaging with the material, trying to explain it in your own words, and asking those deeper why questions leads to a more solid understanding that you can then use in different ways.
Definitely.
And the article even mentions that for tests that focus on memory, different types of memory tasks, like recognizing the right answer versus recalling it from scratch, require different study approaches. You need to be more active in retrieving and organizing information for a free recall test than for a multiple choice test where you just have to pick out the correct option.
Right.
So it's not enough to just study. You need to study smart and in a way that prepares you for the specific demands of the exam.
Unfortunately, the research suggests that when students are strategic in their studying, they often aren't using strategies that are the best fit for the task at hand. It's like using a screwdriver to try and hammer a nail. You're using a tool, but it's not the right one for the job.
Now, this next point is something I think a lot of us can relate to. Not knowing what you don't know. The article calls it mismonitoring of understanding learning and test preparedness. It's that moment when you confidently think you've got it, and then the test proves you very wrong.
Oh yeah, this is a really critical issue. Research from Presley and his colleagues in 1990 showed some pretty surprising results. They found that college students who had just read short passages were almost as confident in their incorrect answers about the main ideas as they were in their correct ones.
Wow, that's striking.
Yeah, that lack of awareness during learning is a huge obstacle because if you
Yeah.
think you understand something, you're not going to put in the extra effort to study it more.
It really is. And the article cites a whole bunch of studies showing that our ability as adults to judge how well we understand something and how ready we are for a test is often, well, way off. We often just don't have a good sense of what we've truly mastered and what we still need to work on. That overconfidence, especially when we think we know what the test will be like, can really undermine our study efforts. It's like sailing into a storm because you thought the weather forecast was clear.
And even if you do realize you don't know something, the article then brings up another challenge: search inefficiencies. It's not always easy to find the information you need, even if you know you need it. Think about trying to find one specific piece of information in a huge textbook or a pile of notes.
Right. Work by Guthrie and his team showed how complex it is to search for information in documents. You have to figure out what you're looking for, decide where to look, pull out the relevant bits, and then put it all together.
And the article points out that students often struggle to find information even when it's right there in the textbook.
Right.
Yeah. And if you have to go beyond the textbook to the library or online, those search challenges get even bigger. It's like being lost in a maze.
So, between not knowing what you don't know and then struggling to find the information you do need, it's easy to see why preparing for exams can feel so incredibly frustrating. And then, on top of all of that, we have the impact of our emotions, particularly anxiety.
Oh, absolutely.
Huh.
Test anxiety is something so many students struggle with. The article explains how anxiety can actually take up our limited mental capacity. When you're trying to study and your mind is racing with worries about failing, that mental energy isn't available for actually learning the material.
Yeah, it's like trying to listen to a lecture with a loud radio playing in the background.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Research on the limits of our short-term memory capacity is relevant here. Those nagging thoughts of, I'm not going to pass, take up valuable mental space. And the article also points out that high anxiety can lead to avoidance behaviors. Suddenly cleaning your room or doing anything else seems better than facing the anxiety-inducing task of studying.
Procrastination, yeah.
They even mention work on our ability to block out distracting thoughts and research on how emotions affect math problem solving, all highlighting how our feelings can really mess with our performance.
And finally, we can't forget the role of motivation. If you don't believe you can succeed in a course, it's going to be incredibly hard to find the drive to put in the necessary work to prepare for exams. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, the article links low motivation to beliefs about not being capable of success, which can be especially true if a course feels way too difficult for your current level of preparation. It touches on ideas about self-regulation, suggesting that students should aim for courses that are challenging but still within reach.
Right.
That mismatch between your preparedness and the course level can be a huge drain on motivation. It's like signing up for a marathon when you've only ever run a 5K.
And the article also brings up how competitive school environments can unintentionally hurt motivation for many students, especially when there's this feeling that your inherent ability, something you might believe you lack, is the main thing that determines success.
That sense of helplessness.
Exactly. That feeling that you can't really control whether you succeed or fail can be incredibly demotivating. So when you put all these pieces together, the tricky textbooks, the less than ideal teaching, and these various challenges with how we process information and stay motivated, it paints a pretty clear picture of why getting ready for exams can feel so incredibly tough.
And the article really emphasizes this with a bad case scenario of a struggling freshman facing all these obstacles at once. It's a sobering but sadly often familiar experience for many students.
Yeah, it really is.
But the good news is the article doesn't just focus on the problems. It dedicates a lot of time to exploring what can be done both by teachers and by students themselves to make things easier.
Exactly. So let's switch gears and talk solutions. What are some things teachers can do both in the short term and through bigger changes to help students prepare for tests more effectively?
Okay. When it comes to textbooks, the article highlights three main research-supported ways to make them better. These are making clearer connections and elaborations within the text, using text signals to highlight important information, and improving the effectiveness of illustrations.
Okay, let's dig into those. What do they mean by text connections and elaborations?
This is about making the relationships between ideas really obvious. Instead of just presenting facts, the text would clearly show how they connect to each other, repeat key terms to reinforce them, and explicitly state the background knowledge you need. For example, instead of just saying the war had significant consequences, it might say, because of the extensive bombing campaigns in North Vietnam, the war had significant consequences on the local infrastructure. That extra context makes it much easier to understand the cause and effect.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about anticipating where students might get lost and proactively filling in those gaps. What about text signals?
Text signals are like signposts in the text. They help you navigate the information and understand what's important. This could include using headings and subheadings that clearly show the structure, providing summaries at the beginning or end of sections, using words like therefore or in contrast to highlight relationships, and even using formatting like bolding or italics to emphasize key terms.
Okay.
It's about making the organization and the main points really stand out.
So it's about making the underlying structure of the information really visible, almost like providing a mental outline for the reader. And finally, illustrations. We've talked about how unhelpful they can sometimes be, so what makes for good ones?
Effective illustrations actually add to the meaning of the text. They help explain concepts in a visual way and can even prompt you to make connections you might not have made just by reading. They should directly relate to what's being discussed and help clarify complex ideas. Think of a diagram that clearly shows the steps in a process, rather than just a decorative picture that doesn't really explain anything.
Right. Not just eye candy. The article even gives the example of Japanese math textbooks, which apparently do a great job of connecting new concepts to what students already know, clearly signaling relationships between ideas and using illustrations effectively. It sounds like there are definitely good models out there.
But the article also points out that publishers don't always prioritize making textbooks easy to understand, often focusing more on just covering all the required content.
Which is a shame.
It is. They suggest that teachers can make a difference by choosing textbooks that are well-written and easy to understand when they're making adoption decisions, and by letting publishers know that these factors are important.
Good point.
And a really practical tip for teachers is to offer alternative, perhaps simpler, textbooks to students who are struggling, using those extra copies that instructors often receive.
Oh, that's a great idea. Okay, moving beyond textbooks, the article looks at what teachers can do in their actual teaching.
Yeah, based on that Van Meter study, they highlight the importance of adjusting the pace of the lesson to match how difficult the material is and how much background knowledge the students have. Going slower when introducing complex topics, especially for students who might not have a strong foundation, is key.
Right.
Organized presentations, where main points are clearly separated and the lecture follows a logical outline, also significantly improve how well students can take notes. And, of course, explicitly pointing out what's important through emphasis, repetition, or visual aids is essential.
All of that sounds like good, basic teaching practice, but it's clear that it doesn't always happen consistently. And then there's the crucial issue of telling students what to expect on tests.
Absolutely. Drawing on research, the article stresses that students do much better when they understand the format and expectations of upcoming tests. Giving practice test questions and tests that are similar to the real exams in terms of format and difficulty is incredibly helpful. This not only shows students what they need to focus on, but also actually helps them remember the material better, as other research suggests. It reduces the anxiety of the unknown and allows students to target their studying more effectively.
Practice tests really do seem like a win-win. They give students a chance to see where they stand and also serve as another way to review the material. Now, the article also talks about the long-term goal of helping students develop good information processing skills. They make the point that every teacher has a role to play in this over time.
Yes, and one important aspect is directly teaching learning strategies. They challenge the common idea that we fully learn how to read in elementary school and emphasize that ongoing instruction is needed in secondary and higher education.
Right, it doesn't stop in grade school.
Exactly. Teachers can model how to read actively and think critically about texts, especially more complex ones like research articles. The first author even mentions their own practice of showing students how they extract the main ideas from assigned readings. It's about making the invisible thinking process visible.
That makes perfect sense. It's like showing someone how a skilled craftsman uses their tools. The article also recommends teaching effective note-taking and reviewing techniques, mentioning matrix note-taking as one example of a method that helps students see the connections between different pieces of information. And they emphasize the importance of making it clear that different strategies work best for different tasks and exam types, and actually showing students how to use them. For example, explaining how to create analogies when studying for a physics exam.
What's interesting is that the article points out that there isn't a lot of research on college professors explicitly teaching these kinds of learning strategies for test preparation. And based on studies with younger students, they suggest that just explaining and demonstrating might not be enough. Students likely need significant support and guidance from instructors to really internalize these strategies and use them effectively.
So more scaffolding?
Yeah, exactly. This also highlights that teachers themselves need to be equipped to teach these learning skills effectively.
It sounds like it requires a shift in how we think about teaching, moving beyond just delivering the content to also teaching students how to learn that content effectively. Now, we've talked about strategies. What about helping students build their background knowledge?
The article emphasizes that students are more likely to succeed academically when they have a good foundation of prior knowledge. They advocate for teaching that is rich in information, using real-world examples and connections to research to build that knowledge base.
Okay.
They also suggest proactively addressing any essential background knowledge that students might be missing within specific courses. For example, if a multivariate statistics course relies heavily on linear algebra, the instructor might offer a review of those concepts at the beginning of the course. It's about making sure everyone has the necessary building blocks.
It's about recognizing that students come to the classroom with different levels of preparation and taking steps to create a more even playing field by providing the necessary foundational knowledge. And then there's the crucial step of encouraging students to actually use the background knowledge they have.
Exactly. Research shows that when students actively try to connect new information to what they already know, they remember it better and are better able to use it.
Right.
Encouraging students to explain things in their own words and to ask themselves why questions are powerful ways to foster these connections. Lots of research supports this idea. It's about making learning an active process of linking new information to your existing understanding.
So it's about moving away from passive absorption and towards actively making connections and building a web of understanding. What about helping students get better at monitoring their own learning?
Well, as we mentioned, self-explanation can help students become more aware of what they understand and what they don't. And self-testing is also a key part of effective learning. However, the article points out again that adults often aren't very good at accurately judging how well they're prepared for a test.
That pesky overconfidence.
Exactly. Making old exams available can be a valuable tool for self-testing, but with the important reminder that they should be used to check your understanding, not just as a guide to the specific questions that might appear again. It's about using them as a practice run and a way to identify weak spots.
That makes sense. You don't want students just memorizing answers, but rather using the old exams to assess their overall grasp of the material. Now, we also talked about how students can struggle to find the information they need. What can teachers do to help them develop better search skills?
The article acknowledges that teaching search skills is a complex area, but they recommend introducing students to the various resources available for the course, including online databases and library resources. They also highlight the importance of encouraging students to ask for help from teaching assistants and classmates when they're struggling to find information.
Shouldn't be afraid to ask.
Right. The anecdote about the first author using journal databases to understand a fast-paced lecture really illustrates the value of these skills in taking control of your own learning.
That's a great example of being a resourceful learner. Now, let's go back to the emotional side of things. What can teachers do to help reduce student anxiety around exams?
This is so important. The article strongly advises against teachers making comments that induce fear or make students feel inadequate. They emphasize that such comments actually decrease motivation rather than increase it and should be avoided at all costs.
Absolutely.
The message should be that with effort and the right strategies, students can succeed in the course. Creating a supportive and encouraging classroom environment is crucial for reducing anxiety.
It's about fostering a growth mindset and a belief in students' ability to learn, rather than creating a climate of fear and intimidation. And finally, what can teachers do to keep students motivated and engaged?
The article notes the concerning trend of students becoming less confident and interested in school as they progress. They discuss how a highly competitive academic environment can actually undermine motivation for many students and suggest rewarding improvement and effort, not just relative to performance.
Focus on growth.
Exactly. Teacher praise is highlighted as a powerful motivator, while negative comments about a student's ability can be very damaging. Giving students tasks that are just slightly beyond their current skill level can also be highly motivating.
That sweet spot of challenge.
Right. They recommend guiding students into courses that are a good fit for their current preparation, and even considering using different reading materials based on students' varying levels of prior knowledge. The first author's use of different versions of a textbook in their graduate courses is a good example of this.
It all comes back to setting students up for success, fostering a belief in their ability to learn and grow, and creating a supportive learning environment. The article has a really helpful summary table for all these ways teachers can support their students. But of course, students themselves also have a significant role to play. So let's turn our attention to what you, as a student, can do to make preparing for exams easier.
Absolutely. Even when you're facing challenges like difficult textbooks or less than ideal teaching, you have the power to take action. If you find your textbook really hard to understand, the article suggests looking for more readable supplementary materials or even a different textbook altogether. Talk to your professor. They might have recommendations or even extra copies of other books they can lend you.
Don't be afraid to ask.
Right. Used bookstores can also be a great resource.
It's about being proactive and finding resources that work best for your learning style. What about when you have a teacher whose lectures are hard to follow?
In those situations, the article suggests paying extra attention to the assigned readings, doing them either before class to give you some context for the lecture or afterwards to help fill in any gaps in your understanding.
Good tip.
Teaming up with classmates to share and compare notes can also be incredibly helpful. You might catch things that someone else missed. And definitely don't hesitate to ask your teacher about the format of the upcoming exam and to look for old exams from various sources, your professor, previous students, campus resources to get a sense of what to expect.
But use them wisely.
Exactly. Remember that old exams are most useful for understanding the format and types of questions, not necessarily the exact content that will be covered.
So it's about actively seeking out the information and support you need to compensate for any difficulties with the instruction or materials. Now, when it comes to improving how you process information, where should students focus their efforts?
The article emphasizes again the importance of using effective learning strategies, actively monitoring your understanding, building your background knowledge, and staying motivated. When it comes to strategies, remember that just knowing what a strategy is called isn't enough. You need to practice using it regularly to become efficient.
Practice is key.
Yes. Take advantage of any study skills workshops or courses your school offers to learn about different comprehension techniques and other academic skills. Make a conscious effort to apply these skills consistently whenever you study, including active reading techniques like asking yourself questions, predicting what comes next, and summarizing what you've read.
Okay.
And explore different note-taking methods, like matrix note-taking, which can help you see the connections between ideas. Research even shows that consistently applying good study skills has long-term benefits.
It's about developing a toolbox of effective learning strategies and knowing when and how to use each one for different types of learning tasks and exams. What about keeping track of how well you're actually learning?
Well, as we discussed earlier, using old tests for self-testing is a valuable way to check your understanding. Make sure to use the answer keys to identify areas where you went wrong and to avoid, thinking you understand something when you don't.
You avoid that mismonitoring.
Exactly. Getting together with classmates to explain concepts to each other and get feedback is also a really effective way to identify gaps in your own knowledge.
That collaborative aspect seems so important for getting different perspectives and uncovering blind spots in your own understanding. And when it comes to building your knowledge base, what can students do?
The article encourages you to read beyond just the assigned material. Look at suggested readings, cited articles, even if you just skim them to get a general idea. Used bookstores can be a great place to find affordable supplementary resources.
Hunt for those bargains.
Right. Consider taking a series of courses in a related area to build up your knowledge in a more in-depth way, rather than just taking a wide variety of unrelated courses. And, as we've said before, constantly asking yourself why. Questions as you learn is a powerful way to connect new information to what you already know. Think of it like building a strong network of knowledge in your brain.
So, it's about being a proactive learner and continuously seeking out opportunities to expand your understanding and make connections. And finally, how can students manage anxiety and stay motivated?
If you experience significant test anxiety, don't hesitate to seek help from your school's counseling services. They can teach you relaxation and focus techniques. Remember that managing anxiety often works best when combined with good study strategies.
It's not just about relaxation.
No, exactly. For motivation, try to take courses that genuinely interest you, as you'll be more likely to engage with the material and build upon your existing knowledge. Remember that success breeds motivation, so focus on actively preparing for your courses, choosing instructors whose teaching style works for you, and being an active participant in your learning. The more you feel in control and see positive results, the more motivated you'll become.
It all boils down to taking responsibility for your own learning journey and being proactive in addressing the various challenges you might encounter. The article also includes a helpful summary table for these tips for students. And while we've mostly focused on individual study, they do briefly mention the value of studying in groups for discussing ideas, clarifying misunderstandings, getting feedback, and testing each other.
Yeah, group study can be great.
As long as everyone has done some individual preparation beforehand.
Right, you need to bring something to the table. So as we conclude this deep dive, the core message is that while challenging courses can lead to significant learning, having and seeking out support is absolutely vital for student success.
And remember that your ability to prepare effectively for exams isn't just about putting in the hours. It's deeply intertwined with how you process information, the strategies you use, the knowledge you bring to the table, and your motivation to learn.
Exactly. And there's a real opportunity here for both teachers to cultivate these skills in their students and for students to actively work on developing them themselves.
It's interesting that the article also points out that we still need more research on how students learn to prepare for tests before they even get to college, and how these skills develop over time. Even something as fundamental as taking notes is an area where we're still learning a lot about how students progress from just copying information to becoming active and strategic note-takers.
Definitely. Ultimately, the authors present many of these ideas as working theories in the psychology of studying, acknowledging that ongoing research continues to deepen our understanding of the challenges of exam preparation and how students can overcome them.
So for you, the listener, take a moment to think about your own experiences with getting ready for exams. Which of these challenges really hit home for you? And what's one small step you could take, either for yourself or to support someone you know, to start applying some of these strategies and make that learning journey a little bit smoother? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.